Alex, who is a second-generation broker with over 2 decades experience in the real estate industry. Alex has been immersed in business since he was 12 years old.
Believe it or not, it was easier getting started in Chicago where I didn't know anybody than it was in the Quad Cities. My first year, I think I closed like 10 transactions for like 2.5 million in volume or something, which was more than I thought I was going to do.
Yeah.
My advice to farming is do everything you can to meet people eyeball to eyeball in an authentic way.
Welcome to the Real Estate Untucked podcast. Today we are joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Alex, who is, and Alex, how do I say your last name correctly?
Wolking.
That's how I was going to say it. So I was going to nail it. Okay, there we go. Second generation broker with over 2 decades experience in the real estate industry. Alex has been immersed in business since he was 12 years old. High five. And has become he's a driving force in Chicago's Northside market, specializing in historic family homes, co-ops, luxury condos, and as a leader of a boutique, team.
Like you're my boo.
Boutique. Oh, boo. There we go. There's truth in every joke. Boutique team consistently ranking among the top producers. Alex has built his business by going deep into his farm areas, solving problems for his problem child listings, and integrating a lot of philanthropy into his work. His efforts have earned him a lot of accolades, including being named one of the National Association of Realtors 30 Under 30. Beyond his professional achievements, Alex is dedicated to preserving Chicago's amazing history and fostering community development through his work on various boards and committees. Dude, I'm thrilled to hear what you have done and how you've navigated all the unique listings, the sustainable things that you've done, and making an impact in the community. So I'm excited you're jumping in, man. You have done so much in the last, I don't know, what has it been, 10, 15 years? It feels like 6 decades, but I think it's been like 8 minutes. How long has it been?
It's been 10 years. It was
holy cow.
It'll be 10 years. I think it was like 2015.
God, man, I remember meeting baby Alex, and here's what I remember. This guy was amazing, and yet it felt like you were in the cocoon at that moment. I mean, you can tell us the whole story, but like it felt like I looked at you and I was like, you are a fucking amazing butterfly, but like you're in this like little cocoon, and you were just ready to freaking explode, and you have.
Thank you, Wayne. I appreciate that. Yeah, let's see, when you and I met, that was, it was like about this time. It was like early Q1 of 2015. I was 23 years old and I had just graduated from college the year before. And I remember sitting in your bold class, and that was my first time ever taking bold. And I had just moved back to the Quad Cities full time, where I'm from, Illinois and Iowa, right on the border. And I remember sitting in that class. I got a lot out of bold, but I remember you pulling me aside during the last class going, you don't belong here. Like, you need to be somewhere else. Like, this is not your vibe.
Quad Cities is not where you were going to. No, it was not. No, John Deere and you are not the way to go. No.
It's not my thing. It was a great place to get started, a great place to learn. But I remember, and at that point I was like, oh, I kind of want to move back to Chicago. I really miss Chicago. And then you didn't even know that. You went out of your way to tell me what you thought, which was, you need to be in a bigger market, not here.
Which was so true. And I remember it was this time of year because I remember walking into that bold with a cup of coffee, and I swear it was only a 60-ounce cup of coffee, but I slipped on ice, and that cup of coffee manifested to about 12 gallons and rained down upon me. And I remember being like, I'm going to smell like hazelnut all day today, and we're just all going to roll with it. So I remember it was cold.
Yes.
Dude.
Yes.
Man, so like for you, what was that transition in the beginning like? And I want to know 2 things. One, I want to know, we're going to dive into what you've done really well, but also like, what have been some of this is unstuck. And it's about like, what's been the biggest mistakes you made and how'd you recover from that? So we want to know all the ins and outs. So what led to, how did that go in the beginning? You moving to Chicago and going like, look, I'm going to take this thing on. And now to be a recognized name in Chicago is not an easy feat.
Yeah. So I still think I'm still fighting to be recognized, but it's here's what I would say. I left a year later after meeting you. I moved September of 2016, and it started off, I originally wanted to be on a team because I thought that was a good way to get integrated into a new market, learning the nuance, you have somebody teach me the differences between what I was used to and just the transaction process differences. And actually Phil Byers, who I worked for in college, I went back crawling into his office January of 2016, and I was like, I want to move back. Remember how you said my job would always be here if I wanted to come back? He was like, I'll never forget it. I messaged him at like Thursday night at like 11:30, which he goes to bed at 7 p.m. Like it's not, but he messaged me back and he's like, I told him, was like, can I have my job back? And he was like, Saturday morning, 9 a.m., my office, bring coffee. I'm like, okay. Like
Very Chicago. That sounds very Chicago-esque.
yeah,
That's
that is
perfect.
zero hospitality when it comes to his office. Like you meet him on his terms. So I went in and I was like, can I have my job back? And he's just like, fuck no. Like you see that office across the hallway, the empty desk? You sit your ass over there, you get to work, you'll be just fine. You don't need me, you don't need another team, you don't need another brokerage, you'll be fine right there. I was like, okay. So
Wow.
he didn't trust me, but I trusted what he saw. And then my
Absolutely.
team leader, Brian Leverett at the time, who since went on to do incredible things, Brian had just started at the Quad City office. And for those of you KW folk, you know that there's family reunion. 12 agents walked out of my office and went to Remax the week before family reunion, and Brian started the week after. And then
Oh,
I was number 3 in the office that year in 2015. So February of 2016, I told Brian, hey, I know you're a new team leader and 12 agents just left, but I want to leave too, but I want to move to Chicago. So between Phil, like basically mentoring me into the city and Brian coaching me out of the Quad Cities, I couldn't have done it without those two.
man.
And of course you, Wayne, for dropping the initial thought in my
Dude, you would have got there eventually. What did you do in the beginning? Like, what did you
So,
do? Like, first, like 6 months or a
yeah.
year, was it just like you walked in, you had unlimited money and support, and it was just easy, or like, what did it look like?
Oh, God, no. Um, Dude, let me tell you. So, coming from the Quad Cities, where I was born and raised, I went to school there. I knew a lot of
Yeah,
people. It's kind of a small town, so everybody knows
yeah,
each other. Believe it or not, it was easier getting started in Chicago, where I didn't know anybody, than it was in the Quad
really,
Cities. My first
really.
year in the Quad Cities, I didn't sell anything. I almost got out of the business my first year in the
Wow,
Quad Cities. But my first year in Chicago, because I had been selling real estate and I'd been with KW for 5, 6 years at that point, so much of my business the first year in Chicago was agent referral because I had agents, they all knew me.
interesting.
They all knew what I was capable of. They didn't know anybody in Davenport, Iowa, but everybody knew somebody in Chicago, Illinois.
Wow,
So my first year, I think I closed like 10 transactions for like 2.5 million in volume or something, which was more than I thought I was going to do.
yeah.
It was more than my first year in the Quad Cities, more than my second year in the Quad Cities.
It's really interesting you say that because I used to tell people to go take bold in a town over, or something along those lines. You know what I mean? Because people would do that. And I remember there's a gal, Jennifer, who actually has kind of a similar last name than you. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, it was like Volking or something with a V at the beginning. But she lived in, I can't remember where she lived. Anyway, she lived in like, I think, Oklahoma City, and she would take bold in Tulsa or something, or reverse, right? But she would get a ton of referrals from going to this other city, and building relationships and everything else. So that's brilliant. I love that.
Well, and so much of my agent referrals came from people I met at Mega Camp, Family Reunion. The luxury division was extremely helpful. And actually, the luxury division was how I got a few of my first big listings
Oh,
in Chicago, was that because it's people knew me and they knew my skill set. They didn't care that I'd only been selling there for months. They
right.
didn't care about that. They knew what I was capable of. The other thing too was I had so many agent referrals coming in that a lot of them I couldn't deal with because they were suburban referrals. So what I did was I redirected those referrals out to agents in my office or suburban offices that had, good books of business or client bases that didn't have a city referral partner. So what I did was I built trust and relationships with them that, hey, I'm not going to come into your territory. It's 45 minutes away. I can't service this client, but here's this referral. And when you've got 5 or 6 referrals going to one agent, of course, who else are they going to refer their city business to? So I built a really strong network within the Chicagoland area, and that helped tremendously those first 2 years.
So I know you're huge into referrals and how you got started, but obviously you didn't hang your hat on that. So how did you rebuild your business while you had this? I'm not gonna say gravy train, but you had a good book of business working. What'd you do on the side? How'd you try and work that?
It was the first year and a half to 2 years I was here. It was a lot of trial and a lot of error. It was deciding what was working and what wasn't. What worked for me really well in the Quad Cities was I farmed the neighborhoods no one else wanted. I went after, so I grew up in an historic home. I love historic architecture. That's one of my big passions in life. And I went after the historic neighborhoods that were gentrifying, kind of use the ugly word, the G word. Transitioning, and I went after the ones that no one was going after those listings, because you have to keep in mind, when I got licensed in April 2011, I was only 19 years old. So there were so few people who would take a chance on me, but the people who would take a chance on me are the ones whose listings had already been passed over by other agents. Agents didn't want them. I took whoever would hire me. And that's a lot of where my skill set has come from, of selling difficult properties, because it came from a time when no one would hire me and I had to figure out a way to sell this house that's falling apart. And it was a great experience. So when I came to Chicago, I had my agent referrals, but I also I got involved in my own neighborhood that I lived in, because it was an area that was gentrifying and turning over. I would walk down the street. There's a mansion district called Hutchinson Street. There's 78 single family homes that make up the neighborhood. They're all $1 million plus. And there were 6 houses for sale at the same time, none of them by the same broker. They all were on the market for 6+ months with multiple price reductions, nothing. So one of my big philanthropic involvements is, and one of the things I did when I was in the Quad Cities, I got really involved with the historic preservation efforts, or historic preservation groups. So I walked down the street one day in early 2018, and I called Landmarks Illinois, which was a local, statewide historic preservation group. And I said, hey, I'm a real estate agent. You don't know me, but if I put a historic home tour of homes for sale, if I put that together for your top donors, would you be willing to do that? And they're like, yeah, we're always looking for ways to get in front of our top donors. Like, of course. Great. So I called all the listing agents that had listings on the street. Of the 6, 5 of them said yes, because they weren't getting any showings. So they're like, yeah, absolutely. We'll open. You just need us to open up the house for 30 minutes? Yes, that's all I need you to do. Great. There was a developer who lived in the neighborhood, and he was still building his business. And was like, hey, if I get a group of old house people together that are big time donors for a local historic preservation group, could I throw a party in your backyard? He's like, absolutely. So then I called the alderman's office, and in Chicago, aldermen are kind of like mini mayors. I invited them, and I there's a restaurant in the neighborhood that they were just starting their catering section of their business. Great. This all works together. I didn't pay for any of this. So because I had no money at the time. So I got a lender who does construction financing to sponsor, the food and all that. I just needed to get people to show up. So, Landmarks Illinois, they're like, hey, we had, about 15 to 20 people scheduled to show up to this event. I was like, okay. She's like, we don't know how many are going to show up. We had like 15 to 20 RSVPs. I'm like, hey, that's 15 to 20 people I don't know. I got to the first house that was the meeting point for the tour. We had 43 people show up to that tour.
Dang.
Went through, and it went perfectly. We just spent 15 to 20 minutes. I talked about the history and the architecture of the house. Everybody got to go see the house. We went on to the next one. One of the houses on the tour sold because of that tour. I was not involved. But what happened was I started getting calls from sellers around the neighborhood going, what's this I hear about this tour that you did? And then I had my monthly farm letters going out with the market stats and everything else. So that's how I built my business. And I started with the houses nobody else wanted. And that's how I did it.
It's interesting, because I'm trying to piece all this together. So, I mean, obviously starting at 18, I started when I was 19. I was starting when I was like 23, right out of college. Wayne, I
still haven't started. I'm trying to
say, I don't think Wayne ever got licensed, but he's just coaching everybody. But my point is, you made your name by doing the gritty, right? And I feel like, I might be wrong on this. I've coached, not coached, but I've brought up a bunch of agents in my career. If you don't have money, like, that's when you figure it out. When you have money, then you kind of hedge a bet, like, hey, I can do this for a little bit, but I don't have to work as hard because I have something. So it's funny, as we're doing this podcast, everybody we're talking to, they've got this grit factor, and it comes from well, a little bit of youth, but I think there's a better way of finding it. I don't know exactly what it is yet, but it's interesting how the string is starting to get pulled as we get through this.
It's interesting. I read a stat about startups. They said one of the biggest reasons startups fail, and it was talking mostly about venture capital and things, about tech companies and things that they said is overfunding. What they meant by that was that they have too much cash and they spend it too fast in all the wrong places. It's not held accountable. You know what I mean? So, like to your point, Alex, like sometimes like having to figure out, like nowadays, if you wanted to do that event again, you'd probably be like, okay, I need to pay this much for catering, I need to pay this much for that. Like you would just go do it. Where now not having the money was actually one of the benefits looking, I'm sure it was not easy, but it was actually one of the benefits looking back, because it forced you to connect with the restaurant, connect with the builder, connect with so that's really what, so you talk about farming though. I want to know really quick, like if you were going to teach someone farming, what would be the nuts and bolts of successful farming that you've done?
Eyeball to eyeball contact. Do not underestimate the value of that. So to that story, so one of the other things I do in my neighborhood every year for fun is I just give architecture tours of the street. And now it's expanded to the whole neighborhood. And I've been hired by, the local library to do tours for their members. And it's just something I do for fun because I love the neighborhood so much. But what happened with that, as I was building, and building on the tours that I took over from somebody else, I started asking the homeowners. I said, hey, I know I'm a real estate agent, but I've got my tour guide hat on today. Do you have any history on your house I can incorporate in the tour? And this is just a sidewalk tour.
Dang, that's so good. That's like the ninja way in. Holy cow, that's good.
I think a lot of agents try to go in the front door. I went in the back door.
Yeah. Yes.
It was this was much friendlier. And I would ask people, I started going to the bold questions. And obviously you're not going to sell, but if you did sell, where would you go next? Or how'd you find this house? Not one single person did I spend less than 45 minutes with. Everybody had a story. Everybody had something they wanted to give. And what I found, these are all homes, by the way, that have big wrought iron gates around them. They don't want anybody coming in. But what happened was I had one of the neighbors told me, she's like, she had been there for 60 years. And she said, I have neighbors who live across the street from me who've been there for 21 years. I don't even know their name. And it was so sad. Like there was this missing connection. Everybody wanted to know each other. So I went to one of the neighbors and I told her what I had found. And she's like, why don't we throw a big block party? Of the 78 single family homes, 56 of them showed up.
Dang.
Everybody wanted to connect. And this neighbor, God bless her, she's like, tell you what, you're not a resident of the street. Why don't you work the sign-in table? Give everyone their badges of where their house was. That was how I met everybody in the neighborhood. So my advice to farming is do everything you can to meet people eyeball to eyeball in an authentic way. Not just send postcards. That's important. Not send mailers of market stats. That's important. But what happened was I've been sending my market stats for a while, but when people saw my name tag and got to see me face to face, what do you think their first question was?
How's the market? What's going on? Yeah. Yep.
And that was what happened. And it just snowballed from there.
So, and I want, if you're watching or listening to this, I want you to get that. Cause this is exactly what we talk about. Brad talks about this all the time when you teach
fucking from my highest horse.
Seriously. Cause it's like, put your name up in lights and shake hands. And you like, and that's the key, right? Put your name up in lights. Oh, you're the guy that does this, right? I got your postcards or I saw your ad or whatever. And then shake hands. And I can only imagine how little business you would have got from just postcards. But you put postcards plus shaking hands or plus a sign-in table, and then it gets exponential. Everyone I know that maybe not everyone, most people I know that are thriving with farming, they're not just sending postcards. They're also hosting the neighborhood garage sale or the whatever the thing is. You know what I mean? So I just want nobody to miss that because that is so powerful and brilliant. And if somebody's looking for like the magic, that's the magic. Do both.
Well, what's fun too is when I invite people. So when I invite my farm neighborhood now, like we do one of the other nonprofits I sit on the board of, their big fundraiser for the year is their casino night in the neighborhood. So I'm a marquee sponsor for that, but I invite the whole farm neighborhood and they all come. This we had about 40 people that came. And then, so I'm always looking for ways to add back to the community. If there's, if it's sponsoring an event, if it's doing something like that, or like whenever I have one of the big homes comes on the market in the neighborhood, I actually do a listing launch party. So instead of doing it like an hour before the public open house, I actually do a Thursday evening catered event where I invite just the neighbors. and they all come in, they sit and hang out, act like it's their own house. I mean, it's kind of fun, but I've gotten such an intimate relationship with them now. They don't call anyone else. And I don't say that, I say that with humility. I mean, they do not call anyone else. And what's funny is even when I've had listings in the neighborhood and another buyer buys one of my listings, they don't call their agent back. They call me to list it. It's like it's as Phil Byers once told me. He's like, "You're like a fire-breathing dragon guarding the castle." I'm like, yep. No one gets into or out of the neighborhood. And even when I don't get the listing, I usually get a phone call from the seller saying, "Hey, just so you know, we're listing with our friend. We would have listed with you, but we wanted to let you know the house is going on the market first." So even if I don't get the listing, I still know what's happening in the neighborhood. It's kind of fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, I love it.
The one thing I want to add is all farming, everything in real estate starts with a personal connection. We're so egotistical in our business that we think sending out postcards saying we're the number one between Main and Maple Street is going to make people call us. But damn, you're right. Shaking hands and using the passive to reiterate what's going on, using social media to reiterate your worth is so huge. But so many agents just skip it, just fucking skip the hard part of putting shit together. And obviously that's what's made you so successful in that, because from the history tour to this, like, it's literally knowing them, and then the market update just solidifies your business going forward. So I know it's totally redundant. I just want to say it because Wayne's not the only one that knows stuff around here. Just want to say that.
Brad's way smarter. At least he tells his people that.
I send myself postcards saying that.
He does. It's like he gives himself he gets little plaques, made for everybody else, and then one for him, best team leader ever, like 10 years running. It's amazing. Yeah, he's unbroken records, dude. Okay, so I want to know biggest failure. Like, what was the biggest, like, man, I shouldn't have spent money on that, or I went too broad on something. Yeah, what has not worked?
Yeah. So there was, when my director of ops, Kevin, started with me 4 years ago, one of my big things was I wanted to expand the farm area. And I was like, I want to put this massive market report together that encompasses the different neighborhoods that all kind of are right next to each other. And they were other neighborhoods there were no incumbent agents in them. And we put this massive market report together, and it was beautiful. It was, 8.5 by 11, glossy, thick cardstock. It was super detail oriented, packed with information. I did get one listing appointment out of it, but we spent way too damn much money on it. I think we spent like 11 grand. I mean, it was a lot. And what I realized from that experience was it was too packed with information. There was a lot of unnecessary, redundant crap in there. That report was 15 pages long. It was too much, way too much. We spent too much time on it because it had to look perfect, had to be perfect, had to have the right, we put so much energy into the details of it, way too in the weeds. And it took a lot of time, it took a lot of money. And we did see a small return on it. We did get 3 phone calls. 2 of them resulted in appointments. Neither one of them signed yet. Anyway, they're still nurtures. So we ended up outsource. And my big thing was, I don't want to hire a company to do this. I want to do it. That's our own thing. I want to own this. Okay. Cause I was like too much pride in the way. We since partnered with Real Marketing to take over that piece. That farm mailer is now 2 pages. Or folding, so 4.
Love it. Yes.
So 4 pages. It is a fraction of the cost of what we spent to send the exact same piece to the same areas. We got really narrow on who we were sending it to. And now it goes out once a month. And we average about 1 phone call a quarter. And we actually have our first listing going on from that campaign next week. So it's a 1.7.
So how many are you sending to? How many are you sending to, like in your farm area? Yeah. And what does it cost you on average?
Now we're sending about, I think we're just under 600 is what the mailing area is. And it's only single family homes.
Yeah.
Between like 800,000 and 3 million.
And you hit them once a month? You hit them a couple times a year?
Yeah. It drops on the 5th of every month. So we spend an average, we've been doing it for almost a year now, and we've gotten a lot of leads out of it. So it's on average, it's about $1,300 a month, which is hilarious because when you think of $1,300 a month versus the 10 grand to send one piece, that was, insane.
Well, and also you kept it kind of small. Like I think, and I don't mean small. I think it's like I think 300 to 500 or whatever it is, 600. Like that range is beautiful. I think so many people they go after, they get 1,000 people or 2,000 people in a farm area, and it's unmanageable, and they don't connect with anyone. Like it's just it's too expensive for them before they get a result. Like Brad, would you agree? Like start with 200 or 300 or 100 and nail that, and then maybe grow it.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure. And I think also, I mean, some of the stuff that we've done, not to start taking over, but like we did kind of the same thing in a major neighborhood for my business partner because I don't sell anymore. But we started doing a movie night in the park with the homeowners association. So that's all we did. We would just buy the rights to a movie. We'd put it in an amphitheater, and half the time it'd get rained out because it was the summertime. But then we sponsored the newsletter, and then we would do a little bit more. So as we gained traction, we both agreed we had to do this for 5 years, right? To really get the traction we wanted. And
Totally.
then it allowed us to add on. But so many people want to come out the gate slinging 10,000 postcards a month. And it's like, hey, why don't you do the same amount of people, but do one quarterly? So every other month, you're budget friendly, spacing it out.
Well, totally, Brad. And here's the other thing too, is the neighborhoods that we're now farming to. So my original farm, to your point, my original farm was only the 78 single family homes and then one other street that was like 33 homes. So my original farm was only 110 people. And that was manageable for me as one person, just trying to meet everybody. But what, to Wayne's point, going really deep with only 100 people where I knew 65 of them, what that did was I started getting calls and referrals into the neighboring neighborhood. So now that I've got a little bit of name brand recognition in those neighborhoods, now we started expanding our farm. And I probably will cap it at about 600. I don't really want to go much bigger than what we have right now. I like what we have. And also it's still in the city of Chicago, it's still only 2 miles wide by 1.5 miles long. It's not a big geographic area. But they're high-end single-family homes in this particular area north of Irving Park Road. And what's nice is when you run that tight of a circle with multiple farms, what happens is you've got people moving from one farm to the next. Mm-hmm. You know, they kind of stay in their little amoeba. They just want to. I just had 2 historic, difficult listings to sell. And I sold those to people that lived actually a block and a half apart from each other in a neighboring farm area. So, and what's nice as a listing agent, when I'm working an open house or I'm doing the showings, especially on a $1.5, $2 million listing where the listing agent needs to be present, you start seeing the same faces over and over again. You see the same buyers and the same agents. And what happens is now you as a listing agent have more negotiating power when you've got one of those buyers competing on your listing because you know what else they've been looking at. So it's I kind of got him. I hate to say it, but I point.
Well, I think a key point you just made there that a lot of people don't pick up. People do open houses, which I'm not a fan of, but I know they work in high density areas. So like, I'm not knocking them on this podcast. I'll knock them on other podcasts. But my point is they put out open house signs, they send mailers, they do all this shit to the neighbors of the neighborhood. Well, they already live there. They're already in the price point. So this better be a damn good house for them to want to move 2 doors down. But if you do a little bit of research and figure out the move up neighborhood just down the street and do all this shit down there, you have a higher likelihood of bringing those people up and along. So that's brilliant for doing that because that's the target marketing. That is how you do it.
Well, and so to that end, one of the things that we do now too is when we've got a big listing coming for like 2 or 3 million in one neighborhood, we'll send out a coming soon postcard to the neighborhood people are moving up from. And that was actually, we tried that on these 2 listings because they were kind of lingering on the market a little longer than I liked. We did that. And within 30 days, we had both of those listings under contract.
That was great.
So, let me just, oh, sorry, Brad, go for it.
No, all good. I'm gonna drink some water. Go ahead.
I was just curious, what have you said no to, Alex? Because I know in real estate, we are confronted with the shiny objects all day long, every day. Like what other things have worked well for you, and what are you glad you said no to as well? Because I mean, we're hit with like, you should blog, you should video, you should this, you should run for mayor, right? Like all the things all the time. So what else are you doing, and then what have you glad you said no to?
Funny you say running for mayor, because I've had a number of people say I should run for alderman, and I've said no to that. But I got involved politically. I got behind some candidates that I liked. That was a good way to engage the farm area. I've said no to team members. I've had people that have wanted to come work with me that I've said no to. I mean, by the way, we just closed 2024. Our unit count was down. We did 40 units this year, but we did 31 million in volume with just me and one admin.
Beautiful, freaking beautiful, beautiful.
That's it. I mean, that was, we usually do about 50-ish units a year, but this year we made a very conscious effort to drop our units and raise the sales price. And as a result, that attracts certain people who want to come work for you because they like what they see, they like who you are, like what you represent. But I've just said no to people that either they're going to be a drain on. I've made some bad hires in the past, and I've kicked myself for it. I have agents that shouldn't be agenting, admin who shouldn't be adminning. Just people that I'm very picky about who I bring on and who I bring into my world, because you spend a lot of time with these people. The other thing too, recently, and this is totally me just like setting the world on fire, is I started saying no to agent events. I don't want to go hang out with a bunch of brokers for 2 hours. I don't want to do it. What I found was that,
dude, it's the greatest way to waste time in the history of the world. Why are we not doing that?
And free food.
That's the point.
Free food.
And free food. I forgot about the free food.
Listen, I'm a sucker for free food, but I get I have just found that so many broker events, like when I was just getting started and trying to build my network and meet people, it was awesome. But then it got to a point where it just turns into, this is probably gonna be a very vulgar thing to say for your listeners. So
you're on the right podcast, by the way. You're on the right one.
A bunch of realtors jerking each other off over their sales. Like no one cares.
Yes.
No one
Nobody
cares. And it is the most insufferable room to be in. And not to mention, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I sell more real estate than most of these people. I don't want to sit here and listen to this. And the people who I want to learn from and hear from, they're not here. They're out doing the fucking job. Like that is the thing that drives me nuts. And that's what I said no to.
Dude, I love that. And I think growing a team is one of the best ways to crush your income. You know what I mean? Especially if you do it in the wrong way. It's so stupid for a lot of people, especially if they do it in the wrong way. You know what I mean? And I think it starts with like, what's the outcome? Right? Is this in alignment with my goals? So for you being, participating in supporting campaigns or being part of that, that makes sense. I'm connected with the right people. I'm supporting what I believe in, yada, yada. But me actually doing this role for 3 years, okay, that's not where I'm at, right? So like what's in alignment with where I'm going and what's just a distraction and a waste of time. And so many things are like that, right? The events, whatever it is, and being really picky about those is huge. But is this in alignment with my goals? Does it bring me joy? And is there a high reward to this? And if it's not like 2.5 out of those 3, it's probably a hell no. And I think so many people, especially this is a great time of year to look back at the last, 10, 12 months of your life and go, what am I glad I went to that brought me joy? And there was some sort of reward to it. And what like hell no ever again? You know what I mean? And like just takes like to audit that stuff. And I think the more you grow, the more you realize like, I get to choose where I go. I get to choose to do. And if somebody doesn't like that, it's radical, unapologetic success. Meaning like, I don't have to explain myself at either.
The other thing I was going to say too, that I said no to in 2024 that served me so well, I fired probably 5 or 6 clients last year. And I got fired by probably 2 or 3 clients too. That's more than I've ever done or been fired in 1 year's time. I just started putting really hard standards in place. If I had, my rule of thumb is, especially when I was taking a listing, was I have to like you and I have to like your house. If I can like your house, but not you, and I can love you and hate your house. Like what I found was every time I had a client that was difficult to work with, it's probably because I stepped out of my own standards of, are these people to work with? Are they going to listen to me on recommendations? And how are they going to be to work with? And when I stepped away from those standards, those were clients that usually took the vast majority of my time. They were the ones who complained the most and took the most of my energy. And so I just went on a spree back in like February and I started cutting. I was like, nope. Take them out of our database. I'm going to refer this out to another agent. I don't have time for them. I actually told one client, I kind of got mouthier. I just had one client who was just being kind of ornery. And I finally just told her, I was like, you and I are not a fit. Good luck on your sale. And I sent her, that was the end of it.
Yeah.
She then called me back and she's like, well, why are we not a fit? And I said, you're not going to listen to anything I do, and everything I do is not going to be good enough. Like, why am I wasting?
It's like going to the doctor and not listening to their advice. Just go find another doctor. That's okay. But like, don't come in here and then not take the advice. And that's okay. And I think that what's interesting is most people in those situations, what I love about you, Alex, is like your level of like insight and humility is really profound, by the way. Like you're 30 years older than you really are. Right. But like your ability to like, but you don't have, what I love about because I know your heart a little bit on this, like you don't have to make them wrong either. Like it's just gonna be, we can just not be a fit, and neither one of us has to necessarily be the bad guy. Right. Like sometimes there's a clear asshole, right? Brad and I mean, you know who it is, but like sometimes, but the thing is a lot of times, the agent feels like, okay, well, who was right and who was wrong? It doesn't matter. A lot of times it's just, we cannot be a good fit, and that can be okay without having to make them wrong or make me right or whatever. So you can just be like, this doesn't freaking work. It's going to be exhausting for both of us, and going our best ways.
Well, and to put a bow on this is the fact that when I started doing that, I enjoyed my business so much more. I enjoyed working so much more. And what it did was it actually allowed other clients that I actually wanted to work with find me, because I had time for them now.
Yep. Right.
And it was, last year was a great year for many reasons, and that one being number one.
That's so cool.
And I think just live in scarcity. They want to take every client, and they're end up being miserable. I'm like, I don't want to be them. No.
Well, I think it's a two-way street, and I think when you can fire people and not hire people, that is my ultimate level of like, you're successful, right? And I use that inside my company when I'm training new agents. Like when they come back to me and say, hey, I didn't take this listing because of X, Y, and Z, then I'm like, great, you get it. Like you have boundaries, we set it. But if you have those house whores out there like, hey, listen, it's a $10,000 trailer, but it's $50. And you're like, $50
Trademark
ain't
Brad
50
Allen
bucks.
2026. Yes.
God. I mean, I'm all about selling some shit, but damn.
So I did have one question I want to make sure we touch on, because you've kind of become infamous, not just for luxury, which is amazing and historic, but you've become a little infamous for like, how the hell did he sell that house? Right? Like it's kind of become like, how the hell did you like that, like Margaret, whatever, that was falling over and, they've been cooking meth in the basement. Like, how'd you, which you learned in Quad Cities, but how did you sell? How'd you become the solver of so many house problems that other people couldn't sell? Like, is there a magic to it? Do you look at it different? Like, what have you done to move those properties nobody else can move?
I feel like I kind of have my little house whisperer moment when I go into a listing, and I'm just like, who is this person going to be that buys this? Like they like crawl into, not just like, what do they look like? And there's a lot of like marketing exercise with that kind of shit. I like crawl into the mind. Who is this person at their core? And a lot of times what I find, it's just, for me, real estate is like a puzzle, and you just have to keep turning the pieces until they fit. And sometimes you got the piece to the wrong puzzle. And, I think I'm a little out there. I'm kind of a unique personality. So for me, a lot of these houses, I totally walk into them and I get them right away. I'm like, oh, you don't fit in like the rest of your neighbors. And there's something about that like taking that quirk and turning it into a selling point. I just sold a house, a condo here in Boys Town, or we have to call it North Halsted now.
Yeah, Alex, get with the program. Come on now. Jeez.
The big neighborhood in Chicago.
Yeah.
I'm
the worst at this, by the way. Like the other day I used the R word, and my kids, and I was like, it was the right scenario, right? Like I hate the word, but it just works so perfect. You know what I mean? In that moment. And I'm not going to admit it to anyone else. This podcast is a secret. And my kids are like, Dad, you can't say it. And I'm like, I know I can't. And that's why I did, you know what I mean? Just because it just, it was terrible. And, but yeah, no, keep going.
But here was the quirk. It was a unit that didn't get a lot of sunlight. It had this massive terrace, and it basically overlooked a really loud nightclub. And I was like, we're going to sell this to some young gay that goes to that nightclub all the time. And like, that's who we're going to sell this to. And, or maybe a gay couple. You're not going to get straights to buy that place. And I was like, they're not going to do it. So I was like, well, it got fair housing. So how do I work around that? This was a couple months ago during the whole like very mindful, very demure, during that craze on social media,
which was amazing.
I wrote the listing description. I put that in the listing description. I wrote in like, you will sashay the night away across from Hydrate Nightclub, and like I put every gay euphemism cliche in.
I love it. Oh, I love it.
I sold it before it even went on the market, and sold it to someone whose favorite nightclub is that nightclub across the street.
And they just get to walk downstairs now. Now, instead of, yeah.
Right. And I had so many comments. And here's the other thing, too. One of my favorite things to do when I get a unique listing is I write the most unhinged listing descriptions I can think of, because most agents just throw those away, or they use Chat GPT. Do not sleep on listing descriptions, because what that tells me, every single time I have a buyer come into one of my listings and I can tell they've read the description, I know that's our buyer, because they have done their homework, they've done the research, and they've already mentally invested. They know MLS sheet forwards and backwards better than we do. So one of the things that we do is in our photos online, you see the living room, dining room, kitchen, blah, blah, blah. One of the things that we do is, if it's a condo, we have the Condo Association FAQ as a photo in the photo tour. We have the floor plan, but also we have a list of all the updates. So that way we've got all the stats for that high C personality.
And you do that right in the photos. Why is that so? That is brilliant.
Yeah. So we put it all in the photos. But here's the thing. When buyers come through, you're not getting asked questions that you've already got the answers to. It's all there. But also, that buyer is now more confident in buying your listing because you've already answered the questions they were going to ask anyway. And that's one of the things that I take a lot of pride in when we have those difficult listings, is give buyers as much information up front, because it will help that listing stand out from others like it in the same
and
price.
And what I hear you saying is, don't pretend it's not what it is. Do you know what I mean? Like if it's next to the freeway, like, don't pretend it's not next to the freeway, and then have people pissed off when they show up because it's next to the freeway. And I see so many agents doing that. And they take this picture of the living room that makes it look ginormous, and they're pissed off. It's like, stop, you're only hurting yourself.
Yeah. So I got fired from a listing earlier this spring because it was right up against the train tracks. Literally, you walk out onto this beautiful terrace and you can almost touch the train tracks because it was right there. And it was not only the train tracks, it was the train station. So you could hear the train pulling in. You could hear, doors open on the left at Roosevelt or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And you could hear the train announcements. I had the best listing description ready to go, and I got fired from that listing because of that listing description. The seller read the description. She's like, if that's what you think of my house, then I don't want you representing me. Meanwhile, she listed with another agent, sold it for $20,000 less than what I could have gotten her. And I read the description and looked at all the photos. Never once. It sat on the market for 60 days, by the way.
Sure.
Because the listing agent that she did hire did not mention the train tracks, did not have a photo of it, nothing. So my thing was, sacrifice the buyers who are going to complain about the quirks.
Correct.
Get rid of them. Those are not your buyers. That was, and like, I've got, the former R. Kelly house listed down in the south suburbs right now. And how I got that listing was an agent referral, because they saw what I did with Brian Urlacher's house up in the North Shore. So they saw the celebrity, they saw large house, they saw acreage. They're like, okay, this guy knows how to sell something unique. Now walking into a house that was once owned by R. Kelly and was featured on a Netflix docuseries called Surviving R. Kelly, and they show the house multiple times. How do you sell that? I made this video, and because I to my clients, like, well, they're in. First of all, my clients are, Rudolph Isley's estate of the Isley brothers. Make me want to shout. I was just like, okay, we've got the Isleys, which is a good, that's got good juju behind it. Let's not hide the fact that R. Kelly owned this 10 years ago.
Right.
Let's not hide this. Because, by the way, the media is going to jump all over it. So we wrote a press release before it went on the market. I had a video done calling out the R. Kelly history, and I called the video "The House Behind the Headlines," because I wanted to see, here's what the house actually is. Here's what the Isleys did after, they bought it from the bank after they foreclosed on R. Kelly. Here's what's happened. I interviewed the caretaker in the video. I showed the list of updates, showed everything they did. I'm like, it's not the house's fault.
That's so good. It's not the house's fault.
Here's the thing. Here's what I did, though. I used R. Kelly to get in the media, because I knew if it bleeds, it leaves. So I wrote a press release, sent it out to all the publications and all the headlines, and I sent that video with it. And when I sent that, so I had to be locked and loaded. A lot of those homes with that kind of quirk, It's a lot of prep work on the front end because you gotta you
Yeah.
gotta be ready for the media circus that's going to come with it. And I've done
Yeah,
that
that's so
multiple.
good.
The other thing too is to get in the headlines. I won't use their names, but there's one publication A and publication B. They're constantly fighting against each other. So Jim with publication A and Robert with publication B, they're always like trying to fight to get the story first. So I've emailed the listing to Jim at publication A and been, hi Robert. I'm sending this to you. And he's like, and then I would email publication B and I was like, hi Jim, like getting their emails confused. I've had people fight over stories before, but that's how I've gotten people in the door.
Oh my gosh, that is so brilliant.
It's been really fun because then all of a sudden now they're writing. And here's the thing: when they're trying to get the headline out first, they skip over stuff, or they leave some things out. Now there are certain listings now that I only send to one. There's certain listings I only send to the other. First of all, it's how I got involved with media. Was they were
How do you do press releases now, and what's your advice to other people that want to, and this is part of the put your name up in lights, right? You're doing the shaking hands, but like what are some of those strategies? Do you use a service for press releases? Like how do you kind of go about that?
so I found publications that have a real estate section.
Okay.
So if they have like real estate gossip or something like that, so like Crane's Business is good in just about any major market. There's a Crane's publication. There's a lot of business publications. New York Times. What's great too with the R. Kelly was I kept getting media inquiries from all the big papers, Forbes, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Barron's. They all start reaching out to me. Well, now I've got the red line into their office. So now I've got their contact info. So now I've just started a database of just those people. Zillow Gone Wild. I've been on Zillow Gone Wild a couple times. I tell my clients when it comes to those media and press releases, I work on it with them together. I don't hire an outside company, but I want to make sure that they get clearly into the press release what's important to them. And I tell them just because it's in a press release doesn't mean the press is going to use it. That they're going to write whatever they want to write, but we can do our best effort and put our best foot forward to try and control the story as best we can. But any news is good news. I mean, it's any press is good press, I guess. But it helps a lot, having that database now. And now I keep them on my drip campaigns. I keep them all on my stats. So a lot of times they'll reach back out to me a couple months later. Hey, we want to do a story about the real estate market. Can you give us a line? Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I want to circle back real quick to the condo above the club, because I'm just going back to that person and their dating life just went through the roof. So Alex, what we need to do now is we need to find a condo above like a Red Lobster or like a Cheesecake Factory so Wayne can start getting more dates. Okay. We're going to find Wayne his next boo, but it's got to be above a Red Lobster or a Cheesecake Factory. So just keep that eye out for us, please.
I will do.
That's awesome. All right. So we've gone through sort of how you got in the business. We've gone through how you've kind of evolved from your farm into actually creating a network and a sphere. And then we talked about your niche of historic marketing and now obviously the higher end, harder to sell houses. What would be your one piece of advice if you could go back your 15 years and you were starting over, you're talking to your younger self? Like, what would it be? What do you think you'd say?
Man, if I had to go back and give 19-year-old Alex some advice, well, it probably would be the same advice that I tried giving myself the first year I was in the business. So actually, as I mentioned before, I almost got out of business at the end of my first year because I didn't sell anything. The number one agent in my office in the Quad Cities at the time, Deb Hausman. I'm in business because of Deb Hausman. She saw me making copies of my license and she asked what I was doing, told her I was hanging my license. I get an if from her at like 11 o'clock at night. Again, she's in bed by 7, saying, I couldn't sleep. I think you should stay in real estate. If it's not hard, it's not worth having. And I was like, well, what is networking? Everyone keeps talking about networking. What's networking? She's like, Alex, go make friends. And that to this day, those 3 words are still the best. That was the best piece of advice I ever got was go make friends. Go make friends. Do it early, do it often, do it regularly. And that's so I don't pay for Zillow leads. I don't pay for any online leads. I don't need to. I don't want to. Just go make friends. Get out of your comfort zone.
So first off, I leave for 2 seconds, and you know what? Unlimited shrimp was a real deal. Okay, you know what I mean. It may have sunk the company, but you know when you get unlimited shrimp, that's a good day.
Boy, get them cheddar biscuits too now. Come on, that's
Yeah,
a full day.
geez, come on. I mean, speak to proof that there is a higher power are cheddar biscuits. Okay, like that's all I needed to know. You know what I mean? But here's what I think is one thing I want to point out is say it, and what I mean by that is like there are people, and Alex, I've had the same thing, but I love your multiple examples of people saying it to you. Hey, this is just a small market. You got to go somewhere else, man. Stay in this. Hey, you don't need to join. Like people have, and I think you're taking that in one way is you're saying that to your clients. Hey, we're not a good fit, or here's what it's actually going to take. Whatever. I think Tony DeSello said this to me years ago, and he said, "Are you saying to your clients what you're thinking in your mind?" And what he meant by that was like basically, don't walk out the door going, "Price is never going to work," unless you've said that to them. You know what I mean? And when you see greatness in someone, say it. And I think so often we assume people see the greatness in them that's so obvious to us, and most people don't, or at least they could use a reminder. You know what I mean? So like when you see that greatness, say it. When you see the things like that, like say it. Don't assume they know it. Don't assume that somebody else is giving them the advice that's on your heart to give them. And I think it's just such a beautiful thing that we've all experienced in different ways that people have said things to us that would have been so easy for them not to say, and it was impactful.
Well, and even to that point too about I've never thought about that because I am brutally honest. I have the filter equivalent to a 1987 broken Culligan machine, but it's and I think in my mouth. That gets me in trouble a lot too. But to your point, like when you see something, say something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
calling out greatness. And sometimes I haven't gotten listings because when sellers ask me what they need to do to sell their home and I tell them, they get offended by it. So I can go to bed every night knowing I said what was on my heart and mind, and I can put that away. Like I got everything out I needed to say.
And that's our job, and get good at saying it in great ways, which you've done a great job with that. Like you say it in a, it's not an unlimited license to go be an asshole, right? But at the same time, like if you have cancer, you want your doctor to look you straight in the eye and go, "You got cancer. Here's what we need to do." You don't want him to go like, "Oh, I think we're," like you want it straight, and that's our job, especially as realtors and coaches and mentors, is to say it clearly. And I say that what do we say that clarity is kind, right?
Yes.
And being clear with someone is kind. And our job is not to help people avoid pain. Our job is to help people get through the pain in the best way that they can. And I think that's a missing skill. And I think when we're in a transactional market, everything's banging and rock and rolling. Like it's easy to like put whatever you want on this number on the sign and it'll work out. But man, when it's a little tougher, you got tough projects, you got higher end things, like that is where we are needed more than anything.
And showing up authentically. I can't tell you how many times I get the comment from people, "You're so authentic, you're so real, so genuine." And I appreciate that. I just had a client last week. He messaged me at like 10:30 at night. He's like, "Would you take me on as a client?" I was like, "Honey, I'm in bed. Like I'm trying to." But it was an $850,000 buyer. And he was like, he found a place. He wanted to make an offer on it. I hadn't even seen it yet. And I asked him, because this is a guy who's very popular, very social. And I asked him, I was just like, "Why'd you pick me of all the other realtors that you know? Like I see you in pictures with other realtors that I know." And he's just like, "I felt like of everybody I know, you would tell me the truth." And that he's like, "I watch your Instagram stories. I watched how hilarious and unhinged you can be sometimes. But I also know," he's like, "most agents are posting videos of this is my new listing at 123 Main Street, and they're not doing anything." He's like, "You're on there openly bashing the people you have to work with." And I was like, in crazy situations that happen. He's like, "That's way more interesting to me." And not that I'm like calling someone stupid. I'm just, the general, the craziness that is the industry. And he's like, "That to me tells me, one, that you know what you're doing. Two, you'll be honest with me. And three, you've got my back." And he's like, "That's why I picked you." And he's like, "Not to mention, you're always posting stuff and you've been in it for a long time, not these other people who get into it for 3 years and then fail out of the business." He's like, "I can tell you've got longevity." And I was like, "Cool." And I was like, "That's not even why I post on Instagram. I just post because I'm pissed off that day." It's like that, which is real. It goes back to being
Which is real, absolute.
That's awesome. Well, we've taken up an hour of your time. We appreciate you sharing with us, telling us all this stuff, allowing us to find Wayne his next condo. And we really do appreciate it because you've got a story that I think a lot of people envy and they don't know about it. And that's why we're doing this podcast, because we want them to hear how people can be successful. And like you said, it's not just buying leads and showing up. It's doing your own thing. And I think people need to be encouraged to do their own thing. They can be really successful doing it. So Alex, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for being a part of it.
Thank you,
Truly appreciate
Brad.
it.
Thank you,
Dude,
Wayne.
you're a rock star. Dude, I seriously, from the bottom of my heart, love you, man. Like, so proud of you. And like, I get goosebumps when I think about your story. And I know it has not all been easy, but I want you to genuinely know how much I appreciate you and how proud of you I am to see, seriously, to see where you were 10 years ago and to continue to do what you've done is like, man, it fucks me up a little bit because I really am proud of you, man. It's so cool what you're doing. And the ripple effect of that is, God dang, it's beautiful. So good job,
Thank
brother.
you, Wayne.
Seriously.
Thank you. I
Seriously.
love you to pieces. And Brad, we just met, but I can already tell I adore you. So I'm
Thanks,
so
man.
glad. I appreciate the opportunity. This was really fun. Thank you so much for having me
Yeah,
on.
absolutely.